we can go now. Good morning, folks. Welcome. My name is Mark Stephen. I'm going to be chairing today's event. Welcome to our second annual Digital Marketing Technology Summit. It's actually wonderful to have so many of you here today. I was just saying to Kate, we do lots and lots of digital conferences, various types, various hues and things like that. This is the first one I can remember where the number of women actually outnumbers the men, which is really, but seriously, and I'm not sure why that might be, possibly because it's to do with marketing, but it's a great thing to see. It's great to see everybody, of whatever hue. If you're here, because this is going to be going live here, obviously, but we're also online, make sure your mobile phone's switched to silent. If it goes off during a presentation, you have to stand up, do a little dance. It gets very embarrassing. You've passed the toilets already. You should know where they are on the second floor. No fire alarm test is scheduled today, so if it goes off, it's for real. So please just get out as fast as you can, follow the advice of staff and what have you. Please don't wander off when you get outside because we need to count heads. All catering will take place in the stratosphere behind digit registration. The most important announcement I make today is the fact that you get reduced rates at the car park. If you go and talk to the staff upstairs, it's £6, which is about half the price you would pay normally. This event will still be a bit different to our previous physical events. If you want to wear a face covering today, fine. Absolutely no problem at all. You're all wearing lanyards and things like that. I think this is a really elegant, simple system. I'm sure it's been explained to you, but red, no contact. Somebody's wearing a red lanyard, leave them alone. Orange, amber, call it what you will, fine, fist bumps, elbows, that kind of thing, and green, more or less up to an exchange of bodily fluids. Nobody much cares thereafter, but please just, some people are still nervous about it, and it's understandable, so take it from there. Please take the time to engage with your peers, build new connections, get involved in the sessions and the Q&As and things like that. For virtual attendees, you can submit questions during the main sessions via the chat facility. Obviously, there will be a slight delay with that, so try and get them in as early as you can, and we'll do our best to include them in the discussion. You can all meet solution providers from across the supply chain in the exhibition area upstairs or indeed online. There are a number of competitions and prizes on offer. When you're all marketeers, you know why they're running those competitions. They're just trying to get your details. So give them your details, you're in with a shout. Some good prizes up there. And we'd like to say a big thank you to all our sponsors today, because without them, we simply couldn't run these events. So please do drop by and give them some time during the day. And if you are tweeting today, could you just include the hashtag #MarketingTechSummit? It just allows people to follow the various threads. Now, no great surprises. The pandemic was hugely disruptive to business. Marketers were faced with saturated digital channels and seriously squirrely customers living in their pajamas. So when you're faced with that kind of scenario, how best to respond? Our first speaker today is Kate Bremner, Director of Digital and Content for Global Marketing for Mackenzie. And Kate wants to talk about the lessons that they learned over the last 2 years. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, what a complete and utter privilege and slightly terrifying to be up first. I used to stand at conferences almost every month. I had the standard deck. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was saying. That was 2.5 years ago. And I suddenly realized last week I didn't know what I was saying and I didn't have a standard deck. But what a privilege to be here. And I think that shows the level of change that we've all gone through over the last couple of years. So first of all, who am I? Why am I speaking to you here today? I'm Kate. I manage a global digital and content marketing team at Mackenzie. We do data and analytics in the natural resources space, and we're all about the energy transition and decarbonising our planet. So it's a pretty exciting place to work. But it's been a pretty challenging place to work, like I suspect it has been for all of you over the last 2 years. The last 2.5 years have been wild. The level of change each of us have experienced professionally and personally has absolutely been unprecedented. It only took a minute or two to get that infamous word in, but it really has been a period of change. And I don't think in my professional career I will ever see change across all aspects of marketing to the same degree that we saw over the last 2 years. We've seen 2 years' worth of digital transformation crammed into 2 weeks. We've seen teams go from hybrid, go from all in offices together to hybrid, entirely remote. Everything changed day in, day out. Personally, I went from managing a team in one office to overnight being at home. Then I handed my notice in the middle of a pandemic, and then I moved to managing global teams in a global pandemic, all whilst trying to stop 2 children killing each other and getting homeschooled and stopping trashing the house and feeling like I was running a cafe with 6 covers a day, constantly feeding people. It's been an extreme period of change. And it definitely has been a period of change in business too. You know, the move to being hybrid has been significant for us. But also there's been other changes. The changes recently of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the changes of oil prices going negative, all of these have had a significant impact on our business. And it's safe to say that change has felt relentless. Absolutely relentless. And I stand here today, like I suspect many of you are, exhausted by change. It's great to be back in person, but it is exhausting and it is new. And it's definitely been an experience where I've learned more leading teams than I've learned in the last 20 years of my career. So what I plan to do over the next 10-15 minutes is share some of those lessons. So first, a disclaimer. This is my reality. This is not your reality. You may agree with some of them, you may vehemently disagree with some of them, but hopefully you take away something that will make you pause, reflect, and at the end, when we do the Q&As, challenge me on my reality. Ask questions, tell me where I've got it wrong in your world. This is definitely just my experience and not yours. And another thing just to remember, I manage a global team. As part of our wider team, we're not out of the pandemic. So we're very excited to be here and in person, but I've got colleagues in Shanghai who are still on lockdown, who are still suffering because of China's global zero COVID policy. So the pandemic isn't over, and because of that, our need to pivot and change is constant and will continue to go. As marketers, that's how we've always operated, right? We look at the data, we pivot, we change, we adapt, we drive continuous improvement constantly. But the last 2 years have definitely stretched our skills and our capabilities to the max. So, I promise my slide deck isn't all just really crap clip art, but this was the best I could do. I'm not a creative. I am not a creative. So what does it mean, for me anyway, to be a marketer post-pandemic? And for me, that means leading a global team, leading a diverse team, and leading in a new world where things are ever changing. So what are the lessons I've learned, and what does my new reality look like? So first of all, there's definitely the rise of what I like to consider the flex marketer. Planning change, adapting to change, reacting to change, understanding change, seeing what we need to do to change, constantly changing, has meant we need to be really flexible. We need to build in time for planning. We need to understand that the plans always change. And that capability to constantly be planning is something I've definitely seen on the rise in my teams. We have higher expectations of the ability to plan, and we expect our teams to be able to flex, move, shift more than we ever did. And my biggest takeaway from that is building in the space, time, capacity, and capability to manage that change. We need more time for it than we did 2 years ago. That is the reality. And also, we need to be better at communicating. So we're pretty good communicators typically in marketing. It's quite often a natural skill set. But actually working globally, working remotely, in hybrid teams, we need to be better at communication than we ever were before. And those 2 core skill sets are the heart of that new flex marketer. Planning, understanding the data, pulling that through, doing the insights, constantly adapting, and communicating that are critical. I've definitely learned from experience that you can communicate your way out of a mediocre plan, but you cannot plan your way out of mediocre communication. The communication, to be honest, is probably, in my experience, more important than the plan. You still need a plan. I'm all about the plan. Katie, my colleague here, will tell you I'm all about the plan. But communication can kind of save a mediocre plan. And those are the skill sets I'm definitely looking for in my people and when we grow our teams. And the other big change that I've spotted post-pandemic is the change in expectations. Expectations from consumers, but also expectations from our employees and staff. So consumers, so as a B2B marketer, so I'll put a big caveat, I am a B2B marketer, I always will be, and I've somehow found a niche in utilities. It's a bit of a random one, I know, but as a B2B marketer, the biggest change in digital for me is the fact that we are now compared against our consumers, against our audiences, most recent and best digital experiences, not against our competitors. That means we have to up our game constantly pushing up. It also means we take our inspiration from different areas than we did before. So, for example, I was talking with one of my digital team last week about Glossier, the makeup brand that does fantastic omni-channel personalisation. We're a B2B natural resources data consultancy, and we're talking about what a makeup brand is doing. And that's because that's what the expectations of our consumers are. They don't compare us to S&P Platts or Rystad, who are our competitors. They compare the digital experiences to what they experience day in, day out. And that expectation means we have to think about our digital marketing, our MarTech, and our investment in an entirely different way. And the acceleration of that change has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. And the other expectation is the expectation of our employees. I've definitely noticed, as somebody who recruits regularly, mass resignation on a global scale is definitely a thing. I feel like I'm constantly interviewing. The expectations are higher. Work-life balance is a question I get asked in every single interview. I never used to get asked that before. It would maybe be thrown in at the final minute on the last interview, and it's now one of the first questions that every candidate asks me. Also, around diversity, belonging, inclusion, what are our policies? What was good 2 years ago barely scrapes by today. And as a leader, I spend more time worrying about well-being, mental health of my staff, the culture I'm creating in my team, than I do about many of the technical and digital aspects that I spent my time worrying about 2 years ago. That is a significant shift. And in fact, I have lost staff recently to people that want to become digital nomads, travel the world whilst continuing to work. How does a big corporate keep up with that and flex and adapt to that? The mass resignation having a massive impact on our team. Recruitment is hard, so you've got to get the basics of that well-being, inclusivity and diversity policy right. It can't be lip service. And that's one of the biggest things I've had to learn, I've had to change, and I've had to take time to understand over the last 2 years. 2 days in the office, 3 days at home is not flexible working. That's just hybrid working. Flexible working is a very different thing, and our employees' expectations have changed as a result. But this is a MarTech conference. So what does it mean? What does the pandemic meant in terms of MarTech? So I know I will not be the only person to use this slide. This is the MarTech map. Helpfully, our chiefs who produced this put a new one out last week. It was like they knew that we were going to be talking about MarTech. I actually was at a conference 3 years ago, post-pandemic, when the current up-to-date version of this slide was put up by every single speaker. And I think that actually shows how important this is. So apologies to anyone else that's got this in their presentation, but actually I think it shows how important understanding the changing world of MarTech and what we're operating within as digital marketers, how important that is. So, some stats. Excuse me, I'm going to have to read from my notes here a little bit. We are at 9,932 MarTech vendors. That is up 24% from 2020. And since they started mapping this in 2011, that's only 11 years ago, it has gone up 6,521%. MarTech is on an exponential growth. And we as digital marketers, we as marketing professionals, we as marketing leaders are expected to know and understand that. Yeah, right, probably not, to be realistic. Some other interesting facts. Actually, almost 1,000 vendors have disappeared from this since the start of the pandemic, which is a 12% churn, which is a pretty big churn rate. But almost 3,000 new vendors have been added, which means during that pandemic, 3,000 businesses have started up, become MarTech vendors, and have found their way on this map. That's phenomenal. That pace of change is amazing. But it's also utterly overwhelming. As a marketing leader whose teams look to them for guidance in this space, what are we going to do? How are we going to manage MarTech? What's our MarTech strategy? I find this so overwhelming. In case you're interested, they have a great website. You can go in and you can zoom in. It's interactive. You can look at the favicons. You can see what space they sit in, what categories they go in. It's genuinely a brilliant way to lose a day or a week, just exploring the different vendors. Content and customer experience vendors have gone up 34%, and very tellingly, the management vendors, so marketing management tools, have gone up 67%. So my takeaways from this, because it's big and overwhelming, is first of all, it's really confusing. You don't need to understand it all. Don't expect yourself to understand it all. Be realistic and pragmatic about what you're going to know. There's also the rise of the big ecosystems, so the big products, the big vendors like Salesforce, Marketo and the Adobe Suite, HubSpot and all of them. And they basically form their own ecosystem in their own right, with all the kind of other apps forming off them. I don't know if anybody's had a look on the Salesforce app list recently, but it is huge. It's almost as big as this. The number of apps that are connected off the central kind of hub ecosystems is huge. So there's definitely big vendors in there that kind of gravitate all the rest of them. There's also a rise in aggregator apps and aggregator products that pull all the data together, and that has to be because it is confusing and difficult to integrate this kind of level of complexity. For example, we use BlueConic as our customer data platform, and it definitely simplifies a lot of the data and pulling it all together. And the rise of management tools, that's got to be because we suddenly went from overnight to working at home, and we had to adopt lots of new tools quickly to enable us to work and operate. For example, we picked up Asana and we ran with it very, very quickly, much more quickly than we probably would have pre-pandemic. So how do I feel about this? Well, I've got a sales director that always uses this line, so I've been looking forward to using this line. This is not my first rodeo in MarTech. I have managed and led marketing teams doing MarTech changes over quite a long period of time, longer than I probably care to admit. And I probably approach MarTech now with a slightly more cynical, pragmatic, less shiny, less dazzled by the new features approach than I maybe did 10 years ago. I really understand the cost of change, the impact of change on people, process, and how you have to build the capacity for that change. So whilst I see this and think it's great, how lucky are we to have all these tools at our disposal, I also am relatively cynical about how many there are and actually really want to kind of strip away the noise and focus on simplicity. So my reality. My reality is I work as part of a marketing leadership team who operate globally. There are 2 of us accountable for our MarTech strategy, but in our leadership team, we're all responsible for our own tools, our own vendors. And we've grown through acquisition. So my reality is we have over 100 MarTech tools to service a team of 100. So my reality at the moment is simplification, defragmentation, bringing it all together. Yeah, it's just trying to pick through a very complicated picture to make it make sense. And in fact, this is only 4 slides from like a 15-slide deck. We have these for all different parts of our team that just map the as-is. That's all they do. What do we have? And what we did was a big exercise to look at what do we have, what do the tools do, how do they work for us, are we using all their capability and capacity, where have we got overlap? And the answer was, quite obviously, we're not using all their capacity, we've got tons of overlap, we need to streamline and simplify, unsurprisingly. For context, just so you can understand what we work with, we use Pardot as our marketing automation platform, we use Salesforce as our CRM, we use BlueConic as our customer data platform, we use Cvent for events, we use ReadyTalk for webinars. Why they're different, who knows? What else do we use? We use Optimizely as our content management system for web. We have a huge raft of tools, sales enablement, all sorts. And actually our focus at the moment is streamline and simplify. And that goes on to why. Well, A, it makes it cheaper to manage, more effective, make sure the data is sitting in the right place. But actually, with all of this, our fixed costs are going up. The amount that we actually have in a flexible marketing budget is getting smaller. And as budgets are challenged, as we potentially go into another recession, we need to get a grip of those fixed costs, and we need to look at how we can push them down. But as our teams grow, as the volume of data we manage grows, those fixed costs are only going to go one way. I read in 2020 that will come a tipping point where we spend more on MarTech than we spend on people. We're definitely not at that point, and I cannot see us getting anywhere close to that point. We definitely need the people, the skills, and the capability to harness the power that the MarTech brings us. I honestly can't imagine a time when we spend more on tech than people. I suspect it will happen, and it probably will happen at some point in the rest of my career, but I can't see it now in the next kind of 5-10 years. The other thing is we've become increasingly reliant on skill sets that sit outside marketing. Power BI, data analytics, individuals, people who understand Salesforce, can do Salesforce development, people that know how to do dev work. We've become increasingly reliant on skills that are not in our wheelhouse, and that has created a different dynamic. We've also started recruiting some of those skill sets into our team to give us more control, more autonomy over our future, but that dynamic has definitely changed, and it has definitely accelerated over the last 2 years. The idea that we can manage this all ourselves is a long gone piece of history. We very much look to the rest of the business, IT, dev, product, so to support us on our MarTech strategy. And the final piece is integration for us is key. I think when I first started looking at MarTech, maybe 10 years ago, we'd ask kind of nice questions about integration. Do you integrate with X, Y, and Z? Now we ask, show us your APIs. How deep is the integration? How does the data flow? Where does it not integrate? We are much, much, much more demanding of our integration, because that, to be honest, for us has been where it works and where it falls down. And finally, my personal expectations of MarTech is higher than it probably was 3-4 years ago. So like I referenced, consumer expectations are higher. My expectations as a leader working with MarTech is higher. And I'm sorry to any of the vendors in the room, but I expect it to work. I expect the data to flow. I expect my team to be able to utilize it. And I expect to be able to demonstrate clear ROI quickly. And it's never that simple, is it? It really isn't. I wish it was. So my advice on working through the overload, and Clever Touch, who are a marketing MarTech agency who do some really great work and produce lots of white papers, have actually put out this graphic. So I would encourage you to go and have a look at that and read some of the things they've put out about it. It's really interesting, really challenging work. But my advice is don't start with the tech. The tech is what enables our marketing strategy. It enables us to do great work, build great brands, and grow businesses. The tech is only the enabler. It is not the answer in itself. It's definitely not the vision. Set out a vision for your MarTech. Be able to articulate it easily to your people. If it takes you 20 minutes to explain your MarTech vision to your team, you've failed. Sorry, you need to make it really simple. And then pick out 2 or 3 priorities of what you want to work on. You can't do it all. For us, that's about getting our Power BI and data lake, pulling everything together so we have one single view and can make better database decisions. And also it's about retiring some of our old tech, streamlining and simplifying. Then to get started, once you've got your vision and your priorities, map out your as-is. Do not underestimate. Well, for us, it ended up taking close to 6 months, because every time we lifted up a bonnet, there was more MarTech that we didn't know was being used. And that's only been exacerbated in the pandemic. People just bringing in new technology because it helped over here that didn't integrate over here. So actually mapping our as-is model post-acquisitions, post-pandemic has been a challenging piece. And then set out your 2B. Where do you want to get to? Recognizing that things will change, things will move. You don't have to be totally rigid in your 2B. You can set it out with some clear, this is where I want to be, but other bits can be a bit looser, and it's okay to be okay with things changing. You have to be flexible, going back to that flex marketer. And remember, when you look at your 2B, compare yourself with best in class, not just your competitors. If we were to compare our MarTech with our competitors, we would walk away feeling great. But actually, when we compare ourselves to best in class, mediocre is probably where we're at. So really challenge yourself on where you're at on your MarTech, and don't just go, well, it's better than Reichstad, it's better than S&P. Your consumers are comparing you against best in class, not against your competitors. And finally, not all MarTech is created equal. And this is the bit that has really changed in my thinking over the last couple of years. I used to be all about the big integrated stack with the data flowing, and won't it be amazing? I've never managed it. I've never cracked it. I've got close at times, but it's been big, expensive, and difficult to do. And actually, what we're doing now is focusing on the spine, and this is a model proposed by Clevertouch, and it's really resonated with us and made it simple. Focus on your core MarTech, your customer data platform, sales enablement, CRM, marketing automation, your CMS and BI, and then the rest, like little hubs, can come off it. And that makes it easier to pick through. And that reality has made managing MarTech, in my world, much, much easier. And if I go back to the slide with all the favicons on, it makes it much less overwhelming, because I know I don't need to know it all. I know I don't need to understand it all. I can be interested in it, but I don't need to keep a grip of the MarTech 10,000s or 5,000s, as it used to be called. So I hope some of that's useful. I hope you take at least one thing away and think, oh, I'll maybe do that differently, or I vehemently disagree. But I thought I would end with this on a slightly more positive note, that if you remember in Friends with the pivot, they didn't get the couch up the stairs. But actually a mathematician went away and using data, some critical thinking, better resourcing, better resource planning, all those skills that we have as marketers, they worked out you could get it up the stairs, and it was all about the pivot and tilt. And they could get it up the stairs. I think that's a really good story to take away from how much we've had to learn and pivot and change over the last 2 years. That actually, we've probably changed ourselves for the better, for good. We've made ourselves more flexible, we've been better at planning, we know how to adapt to change, and actually now we could probably tackle things that were seemingly impossible 2 years ago by just applying our core basic skills as marketers. So with the right data, analytics, planning and resourcing, we can do anything. And I'm going to leave you at that. I hope that was useful. I hope you found something in my reality that you can take away and apply in your work, in your everyday. If there isn't, if you vehemently disagree with me, please ask me a question later on. I want to know your reality, and I want to know where I've called it wrong, because I will learn from that, and I'll understand where I need to maybe tilt rather than pivot. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's an excellent start. There will be an opportunity to ask questions when all of our speakers at the top table at the moment have finished. I can think of a very good example of the reverse of that pivot and tilt story. A few years ago, there was a commercial airline in America that basically all the engines stopped, and the guy was coming to glide and realized he couldn't actually get low enough to land at the runway. But he wasn't just a commercial airline pilot, he was a private pilot, he's used to small planes, and he did something with a commercial jet that only people would normally do with small planes. He turned it on its side, and it's got no lift when it does that, and it dropped out of the sky. And at the last moment, I saw interviews with golfers who said, we looked up and we could see faces in the windows as the plane fell like that. And the people were looking down at the golfers. So in the last moment, he flipped it upright and he landed it. No one has ever managed to reproduce that act on a simulator. He did it for real in the real world, and no one's ever been able to do it digitally in reverse. So it's amazing what you can do when your life is on the line. Our next speaker is Dave Robinson, Head of Customer Engagement Development for Boots. And what Dave wants to talk about is, how do you change the way you personalise the customer experience? So, Dave, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can I just say, Mark, I guarantee the people in the plane were not looking at the people on the golf course. There was something else in their mind, and it wasn't that. And again, before I start, could you just take my MarTech map slide out of my presentation before we get going? So yeah, hi, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Dave Robinson, as Mark says. I'm Head of Customer Engagement Development at Boots, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I'll try and describe a little bit about what that is. Essentially, I work within our marketing function, but I'm sort of the cartilage between a marketing function and an IT function. I have to try and translate what one side needs into how the others can then deliver it, and then vice versa, bring back all the reasons why that's not quite as achievable as we wanted it to be. I've worked in marketing and commercial roles in Boots for over 2 decades, about 26 years I've been at Boots. And for the last 10 years, I've been very, very involved in the Advantage Card scheme and all of the data that we have available about our customers that isn't limited to AdCard, and I'll come on to that. What I wanted to do today was talk about not the technology, actually, but the way in which we're thinking about what the technology can unlock for us and how we can start to think about how we work differently in order to be able to get the most out of it. Kate's presentation on the technology side of things and the way in which that lands within the business was brilliant, and I can't add to that. I can just give a perspective from a big retailer's point of view in terms of how we think about how we use the technology and get the value out of it. So, there we are. I should have probably put that one up first of all. So who's Boots? Most of you, I would imagine, if you're based in the UK, will be familiar with us. We're a really big health and beauty retailer. We've got about 2,300 stores now. Almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them have a pharmacy in. And that's important because actually it means that we genuinely span a spectrum of customer need in health, beauty and wellness, which starts at pharmacy, it starts at people being sometimes very unwell, and ends at the really happy stuff. But that association of everything that we sell from almost one thing to another is a really important part of Boots, and it's a really important part of the way in which I'd like you to take my message today, actually. How we try and link journeys together, how we try and think about the person that we're serving, not about the thing that we're selling. That's a really, really critical point. Our purpose, we've redefined it over the last 12 months, actually, since the pandemic, which has brought health much more up the agenda for us. But we've always been pretty true to this idea that we're there to serve our customers, to help them improve their well-being. It's not about looking good. It's not about feeling good. It's about almost the blend of those two things. We're really rich in customer data. So many of you, I would imagine most of the girls in the room have got an Advantage card. Probably about a fifth of the guys have got an Advantage card. We've got about 15 million people who use our loyalty scheme. And that collects a lot of data. Helps us understand what people buy, what brands they're into, how frequently they shop, what kind of offers they respond to, which sort of stores they use, how far they tend to travel to use one of our stores, where they might work, a whole lot of information about the ad card. But what's really important for us, and where my world's been for the last 5 years actually, is thinking not just about that data set, which is one of the most important ones we've got, but all of the other stuff that's available to us. What customers are browsing when they're in boots.com, how they're using our app, what medicines we prescribe to them or dispense to them. It's the doctor who prescribes it, obviously. What their eye care needs are with our opticians business. All of that data being joined up is really critical to the way in which we think about the customer that we're serving. And what that's meant for us as well is that data very much is at the heart of the way in which the business operates, not just in personalisation, which is kind of my world, but in terms of the decisions that we make about where we put our stores, what we stock, what our promotional strategy is, how we price our products, what goes on the top shelf. All of the decisions that we make about how we run the business are really very, very driven by data. And that's a real privilege that customers share that with us. So our ambition, really, from a marketing point of view, is to try and take all of that data and make it work for the customer wherever we're seeing that customer. We understand their behavior, describe that in terms of tracking what they look at and what they do with us. We connect that data up into a single view of customer. That's one of the tasks I completed in the last 6 months. We've joined all of that data up that I've described, so we have that full view. We have an insights function, a data science function that's part of our group. We don't outsource it. That mines that data to say, well, it's all well and good that we've got that knowledge, but what does it mean that we need to do right now? What's the most important next step that we need to take for that customer? So turning that data into the decision, aligning that with our plan. Actually, what are our targets? What are our ambitions? What are the products that we're launching? What's the emphasis? What's the competitor landscape? Making sure that those decisions line up to what we're trying to achieve. And then the really critical part, and actually where MarTech's come in for us, is in this executing across channels. All of the data that you can know, all of the brilliant analysis that you can deliver is sort of worth nothing unless you can make something move for the customer. And that's the way we think about MarTech as a capability, if you like. And then, of course, at the back end of that, there's a virtuous circle that we've got to try and create here. We've got to deliver all of that work, but then we've got to see what it did. And that creates more data points for us to feed back in and make the propensity models work harder and get it more right next time. But where we've been as a business, as a really big business with an EPOS system that is about 36 years old, we were one of the very first in the UK to implement it. It's the same one, it's still there. Where we were at is, whilst we had a big ambition, the limitations of the stack that we were using or the spine that we have just meant that we couldn't do things that we wanted to do. We hadn't joined the data up. The technology that we used was disjointed. We had a website that you couldn't actually do anything different on, depending on who the visitor was. Everyone got exactly the same message. So the communication that we sent to customers was really common. The experience when I'm on the app bore no resemblance to what it was that I was seeing when I was on the website, or to the email that I received. And when you walked into a store and you talked to a customer, talked to a colleague, almost the first time you'd met them, there's no memory of the exchange within the store. And structurally and organisationally, we asked a lot of the individuals within the business, actually. We asked them to cover a really wide span of tasks. So we bring marketeers in, they might have joined the business 10 years ago and the world was really, really different. Blame me, 25 years ago when I joined, the internet wasn't even a thing. Mobile phones, I remember the first mobile phone I got thinking, I really don't know why I need this, but hey, let's go with it. We asked all of the people that worked within our teams to do a lot, be creative, but think about how you do the targeting. Oh yeah, bear in mind the data as well. That's a big ask for anyone. I'm not good at all of that stuff, and I've been there for ages, and I live and breathe this. For any individual within the team, it's much easier for us to think about the task that we give them rather than the tasks that we give them. And then really importantly for us, all of this made it really challenging for us to work with our partners. And when I say partners, I mean the big brands that we work with and whose products we sell in our stores and on our website. Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal, Unilever. All of those brands want to work with us because we've got a really brilliant customer base and fantastic reach. But the technology wasn't helping us to work in partnership with them and unlock that commercial opportunity of working together. So we're making changes. And I'll walk through these steps, but I hope this is a helpful framework, and it's very, very, very technology light. So don't worry, you can not worry too much about that part. What we're starting to think about now is, who is the customer that we're serving? Start with that, not with what we used to start with, which is what's the thing we're selling. Start with who's the person that's in front of us, or who's the person that's looking at the screen right now, or who's the person that's opening this letter or opening this email or reading this push notification. And then think about, well, what is it that we're going to say to that individual? The final step for us is how we then deliver it, and that's where the technology comes in. So let me break that down a little bit. We're shifting that mindset. This is the most important message I think I could give today. We're shifting that mindset from what we have to say. Okay, let's work out who we're going to say that to. We've got a new launch coming. Right, okay, pull an audience together and we'll tell that audience about the new launch. And making that much more who we're going to be talking to today and what are the things that we should be talking to those individuals about. That's the most critical thing. That's the most critical shift in our minds around being able to personalize effectively. And it's exactly where your marketing technology needs to be pointed at. So how would I describe what we did before? And actually, to some extent, what we still do now. We haven't completed this shift by any stretch. But what we have to say, who we're going to talk to about it, always for us starts with the trade plan. It starts with a massive wall with all of the calendar on and all of the categories on and what's launching when and what's the offer going to be. Okay, great, that's what Boots is standing for. That's what's going in the window. That's what's going to land on the homepage. That's where we start. That's pretty big and it's pretty hefty to move. It's always governed at a senior level. Always governed at a senior level when you think in this way, because the trade plan drives the numbers. So here's the forecast. Have we got the big, we're calling out the big things. Yeah, great, we'll hit the numbers, super. Always governed at a senior level. So immediately you've sort of built hierarchy into the way in which you think about a plan like this. And then really, really critically, it doesn't really respond to customer behavior. That big wall chart doesn't tend to go, oh, hang on a minute, let's see, Mavis wants something else, let's change it around. No. Now the plan says that we've got to talk about this. That's really hard to get it right for individuals when you're trying to think it that way. So what does the shift look like when you turn that on its head and you say, well, let's start with the person and think about what it is that we're talking to about. You're starting with the customer. You're saying what's important to this individual. And of course, you can aggregate them. This doesn't work only if you're at a segment of one. We try and think that way. Practically, efficiently, sometimes it's easy to bundle the customers together when their likes are similar. It's managed through agile working. That's where the responsiveness comes in. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've changed the structures not just within our IT teams to deliver in an agile way, but actually our marketing teams now work in squads. And they align to categories and they work with the commercial teams, but they're set up as agile squads with the right level of specialism within them to make decisions themselves, not made by the boss. The CMO just needs to know someone's on it. He's not telling the teams what it is that has to happen. And it's triggered by each individual's signals. So if you've done this, then we'll do that. And that is much more complicated than life used to be for us, of course, but it delivers a much better outcome. So there are two big elements that we're introducing to the plan, again, not technology, to the plan that helps us deliver this. The first, I'll call air traffic control for want of a better term. And this is where we've got our contact rules in. This is how we try and manage the idea that each customer isn't being bombarded with 17 messages a day from us. And we're not talking about migraine and talking about mascara on the same day. That just doesn't make sense. There's a myth, by the way, for us that we'd always think about, well, when the customer comes in the store, get one more thing in the basket. Customers come into our stores with a certain mindset on any given day. And if you're not feeling well and you do have a migraine and you've got flashing lights and you can't even see the shelf, that's not the time to talk about the new skin cream. Maybe you're a customer we should talk to the skin cream about, but let's do that tomorrow. Or let's do it the next week. Let's not try and cram it all into the basket on the same day. We get quite greedy when we think in that way, and it just doesn't work from a customer point of view. So the contact rules, the business priorities, the different variants, we'll build those things in so they're available for us to use. And then we think about responsive communications. And this is probably the best example of that. How do we get triggered then? So you bought this product X number of days ago, so every one of our products now we've mapped in terms of how long should this last on normal usage. I'll give you an easy one. A pack of 90 one-a-day cod liver oil capsules. If you're taking them as you should, kind of know when it's the right time to say to you, do you want to buy these again? So we make that really easy. We just remove some of that friction for the customer. It's just a click and repurchase. And we've done that for all of our products. So we can set that product replenishment up. That's a really great example, I hope, of us not having a trade plan as such, but saying, it doesn't really matter whether you bought that cod liver oil in February or on March the 17th or on August the 31st. 31 days in August? I think there are, aren't there? Well, let's say the 30th, and then there's no complication. Each of those customers gets that message at the right time for them, not in the way that we used to do, which is January's vitamins month. That's when we talk about cod liver oil. Much, much different to how we'd make it work. Or if a customer has enough points on their loyalty program to treat themselves to something that we know that they love but they buy really infrequently, or which tends to be a little bit more expensive than the thing that they normally spend money on, that's a good opportunity for us to prompt them to use those points, come back into the store, take advantage of all the stuff that you've been accruing, all that credit that you've built up effectively. But again, that's triggered by that customer. It's not triggered based upon our trade plan. Technology does underpin this shift, and the big shift that we've made in this space is implementing Adobe Experience Cloud. We've lock, stock, and barrel replaced everything that we used to do with Adobe. We don't have, thankfully, thousands of solutions in there. If I were doing this again, I think I would do it in a similar way to the way we've done it, which is don't be paralyzed by the extent of choice that's on a MarTech map. Make a decision and go with it. We've benefited enormously from trying to get some wins on the board and get some momentum behind it and then start to add to it, rather than staring at the options for so long that the time's passed before we've actually made a move. And that would be my encouragement. Now, if you're a much smaller organization and you have less legacy systems to try and deal with, maybe it's an option to be a little more optional. For us, any change in our technology takes a long time and costs a lot of money. So we have to get it right, but once it's moving, just keep it moving rather than always think, oh, maybe if we go left or right. So that's been a big shift for us, that Adobe stack, and that's for our website, it's for all of our CRM activity. It really interestingly, it's in our paid media. So when we invest our digital media A&P, we're using our data and using the Adobe Cloud to be able to target that more effectively than we were before, which is really interesting because we're starting to target outside of our own space. But then organizationally, some really big shifts that we've made. That CRM specialism is embedded within those marketing squads I mentioned earlier. We've introduced specialism. So the team that I used to run, our loyalty proposition team, as we called it, the CRM team, we've split that in two, and we've said, you guys work on the factory line. You just become absolutely brilliant at getting things out the door using the tech. And you guys focus on the brief and focus on the creative and how we want it to look. And when you know what you want, give it to these guys and they'll get it out the door. In the olden days, every individual had to do all of that stuff. So if they were really creative, they hated this bit. And if they weren't that creative but loved this bit, it's like, okay, yeah, fair enough. And they could just never get the skills to be able to crank the handle fast enough. Finding people that love this and finding people that love that, brilliant. It's a game changer for us, like literally a game changer. We've reduced the time it takes by about 75% to get things out the door. That's a massive, massive shift. And then one thing that we did about 2 years ago and we're maintaining is dedicated resource on development. So again, lifting that, think about the future, away from the people who are trying to get the stuff out the door, and say to a team like me, who understands enough about IT to be able to have sensible conversations without necessarily doing the job, to say, we'll look at what we could do, we'll look at what the next step is, we'll look at what tomorrow's capability needs to be. You crack on with today, we'll make sure tomorrow's better. So to close, 4 things that we've learned, I'll pull out. The first for us is challenge the norm in the way in which this stuff lands. If we hadn't been bold enough, actually, to think about ripping up the old trade plan approach, we'd still be doing it the way that we've done it for years and years, decades, actually. And that almost felt like a bit of a sacred cow within our business. But do challenge that. And you'd be surprised, I think, whatever the size of your organization, with the right story and the right proof points, how much that shift can actually happen. Secondly, and Kate made this point more clearly than I can, don't think about this as a technology thing. Think about this as a business change thing. Technology and the way you organize and the culture that you want around this and the people that you've got, that's what makes this stuff work. That's how you start to personalize more effectively. If you say, oh yeah, IT are doing MarTech, this is about the way the business works. That's really fundamental. We didn't realize that until about 90 seconds into the project, when it became really clear, hang on, the wrong people are thinking about this. And we made that change really quickly, and I'm really glad that we did. Connected to that, third thing I would say, specialism really does work. Don't be afraid of it. It feels a bit old school, doesn't it, to say, oh, no, but what about people's development? People want to learn new skills. Our learning actually is people want to do what they love doing and what they know that they're really good at. And don't be afraid, when it's right, to say to people, you know what, that's the box that I'd like you to play in. And if you want to be in the box, terrific. And the pandemic's made it a little bit easier for us to find them. The guy who leads our orchestration team, the factory line, actually lives in Edinburgh, and we're based in Nottingham. I think he's been to Nottingham once in 18 months. It's fine. It's all technology anyway. It's fine. And then the final thing for us, I mentioned this earlier on about wins on the board. Establish and maintain momentum. If you stare at the problem for ages and ages and ages, in your head, maybe you fixed it, but in reality, you haven't. Get some things happening. Show the people in the business who you're trying to unlock the investment from, just the little things that are making a difference, and then it starts to roll. And as it starts to roll, then it starts to work. I'll give you a great example of that for us. In the last 3 weeks, we've launched better pricing for our customers with the Advantage card. Price Advantage. We've taken about 500 lines, and we've made them cheaper if you shop with the card. It used to always be about collecting points. Now, yes, you get points, that's great, but you also get a better price on the day. And there was some nervousness around implementing that at the outset. We put it in, we tested it, we saw some results. Okay, that's good. What if we do it on some more lines? And as we went through pilot and we started to add categories and the business could start to see what difference it made, suddenly now it's like, let's get it on TV. Let's push this hard. This is the next big thing. Just because we started small and got it moving. I think exactly the same about the technology. I think exactly the same about the way in which you're using it. Hopefully helpful. Again, as Kate said, you know what? You might have a completely different experience or a diametrically opposed view to mine, and I'd love to hear questions or builds on it when we have the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. When you think about it, that old approach of, a company deciding what do we want to say and then deciding who you're going to say to makes no sense at all. You know, if you walk out your front door and you go down the street, the conversations you're going to have are dictated by who you meet. You're not going to have the same conversation with a school child as you are going to do with a police officer. So you have to start with who's standing in front of you. Makes perfect sense. Now, I am strangely excited by these chairs. We've never had these chairs before, and there are perhaps half a dozen people in the room who, like me, can remember black and white television, and people who sat in these chairs were really cool. And it was people like Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Ronnie Corbett. So this, for the first time in a Digit conference, is going to be fireside chat. Make of that what you will. The next two speakers are Luigi Raw, Senior Data Engineer for Enjoy Digital, and Jack Frimston, Co-Director, We Have a Meeting. And they want to talk about the life or the use of automation in digital marketing by way of a fireside chat.
I've definitely got more of a Ronnie Corbett look than some of the other cooler people you mentioned there. Good morning, MarTech. My name is Jack Frimston. I am a consultant, co-director of a company called We Have a Meeting, and we work closely with this year's sponsor, Kaboola. So many of you might be thinking, what is a Kaboola? What does it do? What has that funny little blue octopus got to do with anything when it comes to MarTech? Oh, there we go, clicker. Brilliant. So we are an end-to-end ETL platform, data stack as a service, which is great, and there's many people in the room that will understand that. For those of you that probably don't understand that or would like a little bit of a breakdown, I'm going to go a little bit into that further. But from my point of view, working with Kaboola, it's more about the problems and the problems that you working in marketing will face. So I'm sure that you've sat there in Zoom calls across the screen from different vendors, and they've spat at you the best features and benefits, but actually it's all about the problems that you guys are facing and the problems that you have and the problems that we solve. So I think today we're going to get into it. We're going to have a chat with Luigi, and we're going to focus more on the problems that might exist within the data. So it's going to be a bit of a fireside chat. I think Mark volunteered to make some fire noises as the conversation goes on.
Pretend they are.
Amazing. So, who has children? Yeah, a couple of you? Amazing. So, I want to break it down. So, imagine you've got children. I've got a 7-year-old nephew, and when he walks in from school, he kicks off his shoes in the front room. Okay, kicks off his shoes in the front room. And then he goes into the kitchen to get himself a nice lolly, and he might take his tie off and he might throw it on the floor. And then he goes into the front room to stick some TV on, and he takes his blazer off and he throws it on the chaise longue, which is a word that everyone's using. It's very 2022 at the moment. He throws it on the chaise longue, which is a nightmare for my sister, who has to go around the house and tidy up after him. Now imagine those items of uniform are very, very important pieces of data. Do you see where I'm going with this? Maybe. So what Kaboola does, this little octopus, it goes in the house, it goes around the house, and it finds all these. It finds the shoes that are hiding under the chaise longue, and it puts it all in one place. It tidies it up, it irons it, it folds it, it cleans it, it gets those Ribena stains out of it, and then it will present it back to you in an orderly fashion, which is going to make it easier for school tomorrow. So that's a little bit about what Kaboola does. So imagine they are pieces of data. It's one of those that it will go in and it will make all of your data easier to manage, which is going to obviously save you time and energy, which is the main focus for Kaboola. So I would like to introduce Mr. Luigi.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I'm Luigi. I'm the Senior Data Engineer at Enjoy Digital. So I might, as has been kind of said there, I deal with the data ops for a digital marketing agency based in Leeds. And I'm sure many people have these experiences that data is pretty much disparate. It's all over the place. And, you know, we're always looking for the best MarTech to pull all that data together and to make the best of what we have. Not just for us as marketers, but also for each and every client that we work with. It's absolutely, I'd probably say it's more critical in the last few years to have that data available near live. because decisions need to be made faster, budgets need to be passed where they need to be, and it's tools like this that allow us to enable that to happen. So yeah, I think that kind of summarises really how we've started the integration, but as we continue, you'll hear more about that.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about your company and what you do on a day-to-day basis and what your main focus is, I guess.
Yeah, so I work within the data ops team, so it is purely about bringing all the data together from all of the different marketing teams. But being a full-service agency, we deal with design, dev, we deal with all the kind of marketing, be it traditional or digital marketing. And it's using the data in the right places. So from a development perspective, it may be looking at the kind of typical audience and how that journey looks so that they can analyse and they can build websites that actually make sense. That feeds into conversion rate optimization, which then feeds into the digital marketing strategies. So it's not having these siloed departments within an agency. It's using data to join each and every department and almost kind of make them work as one hub. So that's kind of how we work that.
Fabulous. And if I was to ask you like a really massive open-ended question, so what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced when using data within your role?
Oh yeah, that's an easy one. The volume and complexity. Again, it's fair to say that it's no longer just about your Google Analytics data or your Google Ads data. It's using CRM data, CMS data. It's using, a spreadsheet that gets sent around the business as an email, as a CSV or an Excel sheet. It's trying to piece all these points of data, and each and every data set changes in one way or another. The complexities and the requirements from clients is ever changing. That's good for us because it means that no two projects are the same. It keeps things fresh, but it does increase the challenges because of the volumes that we get through.
Okay. And if we were to rewind into a time when obviously you weren't using Kabbalah or different things, what were kind of the biggest issues that you were facing back then?
It's the automation. A lot of the work that we did, we would typically write a lot of things in Python, and we'd write all the scripts and we'd run them that way. Some of them were having to manually log into platforms, download data, and then process that ourselves, tidy it up. But we were getting to a point where maybe a week's worth of time was being used a month just to process data. And that becomes problematic because as a data ops engineer, I have to try and kind of solve those problems and make that data flow and make decisions happen quicker. And it was becoming more difficult with the volumes that we were using.
Okay. And I think you touched on it there, but what would you say were the biggest kind of impacts, Luigi, that had on, I guess, yourself and your team and the business?
Oh, grey hairs, definitely. It's the biggest challenges was resource. As you get more complex data sets and you are doing more and more, you're finding that other projects that you could be starting on are kind of getting pushed back, and it's so easy just to go, well, I'll do this tomorrow, and before you know it, it's 3 weeks later and you still haven't done it. So it's trying to solve those problems. It's a constant battle, but we get there.
Okay. And was there a trigger point for you when you thought, actually, it's getting a bit too intense now, these are problems that did something dramatic happen?
I wouldn't say something dramatic, but I'd probably say kind of maybe mid-pandemic. We, obviously as everybody was kind of, places were starting to unlock and businesses were starting to invest more in marketing, we found a lot of our clients wanting to kind of shift focus, and a lot of that was shifting into the data requirements and more kind of proactive approaches to everything. So I guess it was driven by our need to make decisions quicker, but also clients were wanting more, which that's a great thing for us, because it's constantly pushing us to want to be the best that we can for our clients. So yeah, I think that was kind of the point when we realised we actually need to take that step back and look at how we're doing things. I mean, it's been mentioned a couple of times now about kind of the world of MarTech and what's there, and there's so many options available. It is a minefield, but what we did is rather than looking at the technology itself, we stepped back and actually looked at the problem and approached it that way. So, sat down as a team, worked out what the problems were for each and every department, and then from there looked at our tech stack to then go, right, well, these clients have this issue, how do we solve it? And that kind of led us to where we are now.
Okay. And do you, I think you mentioned it there, do you think that the pandemic, if the pandemic hadn't happened, do you feel like that was a tipping point for you, or do you feel like we would have ended up down this lane anyway?
I think we'd have ended up there anyway. And we're a data-driven agency anyway, so kind of data and insights at the core of everything we do. So I think it's always going to have been something we did. I think what's happened is the pandemic's maybe changed people's opinions on data, and I don't know whether it's our clients have just used that time to go and clue themselves up on what data means for them, but we've actually found a lot of them asking more questions, and again, that's exactly what we hoped, because it's fair enough, we can sit in front of them, we can talk data for hours and hours, probably send them to sleep 9 times out of 10, but when those clients are asking us the questions, that's when we get excited about it as well.
Okay. And you got to a point where you were like, right, okay, we're going to go out to market. How would you sum up, if you were like, when you were looking for vendors and you were looking for different things, how would you sum up the problem that you needed solving?
I think that when we stepped back, we realised that the biggest problem we had was automation. That's what was taking a lot of the time. I might, again, getting data from Google Analytics, Google Ads, and most other marketing platforms. That's relatively easy. It's those obscure data sets, those are the ones that we were finding more resource was being spent trying to get that automated. So I think that was kind of our tipping point of they're the biggest problem, they're the biggest resource issue, so it's those that we need to focus on.
Okay. And then so the time's come, you know the problem, you know where you want to, you know the problem that you need to solve. So what kind of different solutions did you look at? Obviously, I thought that picture was brilliant earlier. There's so many different vendors and there's so much choice. Where do you start? Like, where do you begin?
I think this is the critical point of don't look at the tech, look at the problem. There's many marketing automation platforms out there, and they all do their own great thing. But what we needed was more of a almost a data ops platform, which this is kind of what led us into just a handful of potential vendors. So I think it's that's how we took that approach, is we realized that just marketing automation wasn't enough. It needed to be more about the data, how we processed that. But yeah, we did look at a few, we tested a few, gave myself migraines probably more times than I needed to, but we eventually kind of settled on something that we knew solved, well, most of the problems that we had at that time.
Okay, and was there like, how did you go about that process? Did you shortlist them down? Like what other things were you looking at the time?
Well, obviously I don't hold the purse strings, so it's always a money thing as well. Yeah, we had to kind of look at, what is it going to save us as an agency, but what is it actually going to solve? Because, like many other companies, we have a lot of technology partners, and just adding another subscription on top of that is not really the right approach. Mm-hmm. So it's, what is the problem? How can we solve it? What's that going to do for us moving forward? What's that going to do for our clients moving forward? But then does the kind of the cost level with the benefits? So we kind of looked at it from that point of view. But then obviously the fundamental part is, did that platform solve all of our problems, or at least most of the problems? And that's kind of, we did get to the point of shortlisting 2 potentials, and yeah, eventually kind of swayed one way.
And that's what the decision-making process was on. It was just like this. Actually, you made a metaphorical checklist and said it ticks the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of moves on then to the partnership discussions. I think one thing that we're really keen on is that we don't just pick up a technology partner. We want to be a true partner with those, you know, so work closely with them. That's why we're here, I guess. But yeah, it's to work closely with them and make sure that kind of we're helping them as much as they're helping us. You know, we want something that is going to develop as we develop and as the market changes, and are constantly kind of in the loop on, you know, the changing data landscape. So that is another kind of swaying factor for us.
Okay. So then when you started using Kabula, would you be able to like give us, I guess, the comparison from like the before and after? Did your beautiful beard, did it go from grey back to, what were the biggest like changes?
I mean, the biggest thing was kind of the amount of time that we started to see savings come into play. I mean, we obviously started with the biggest problems first, but the ones that were easier to solve. So if I take kind of our Google Analytics streams, for example, with the amount of clients that we have and kind of how many streams we're processing, we were spending, days more than hours processing data and getting it into the right funnels and where it needed to be and building reports. But we were only generating weekly or monthly reports. We wanted to start to provide more. So we decided just to fully automate that stack. And that itself probably shaved a good 2 days solid off our kind of monthly processing. So just 2 days within a short period of time was immediately, it was paying for itself. That's what we're doing.
Fantastic. And this is probably a bit of a large, broad question, but maybe specifically tailor it to yourself. But why is this access to data so important when it comes to the world of marketing?
The more kind of the data you have is about making decisions. And again, it's not just about the marketing decisions that are being made. It's about clients' decisions. Like I say, the kind of biggest thing for us is our clients want to be involved in marketing, and I call them clients. Again, they are partners. We work closely with them, and we always want to work as if we're an arm of their business. And I think that's where it's kind of really helped for them to make decisions quicker, for us to make decisions quicker. But it becomes easier to manage and easier to explain because there's a lot of data. There's so much out there that's available to clients, but trying to make it manageable for whether it's their kind of internal marketing manager all the way up to, a CEO. They don't care about how many campaigns have received X number of clicks. They want to see, how much they've spent and how much it's made them. So we kind of break all that down and allow them very quick, almost to the minute access to their data.
Okay. And if we were to get into like the semantics of like, we understand now what Kabula does and like how it might solve the problems that you have. In terms of like use cases and what it's actually done for you and the team, I guess, and pushing that out to the rest of the marketing team, could you talk about some of the use cases and things that you've seen happen since?
Yeah. So I suppose one of the biggest things, and we're still kind of actively working through it, but one of our kind of biggest partners at the moment is a charity within the UK, and they have mountains of data, and it's trying to kind of make sure that we can get that data processed through really quickly. It's probably one of the most time-consuming kind of, client databases that we have. They're getting so much data that just looking at their analytics account will sample the data to a ridiculous number. So that means that we're not seeing a true portfolio, a true profile of what's happening within their data model. So yeah, by being able to use tools, by using Kabula, we can get that data unsampled, but provide those reports kind of in rapid succession for them. It's saving us huge amount of times. It's saving them huge amount of time because they're not having to process data internally either. So it's, again, although we might have saved, a couple of days of processing from our side, it's also what the client's finding as benefits because they're not having to process that data and they're getting unsampled data quickly.
Okay. And would you say it was the charity, or would you say have there been any more like real valuable impacts and use cases that you've seen? Are there any more examples that you've seen within the business?
I'd say that's the kind of the primary one, but we are still kind of rolling it out across other clients, and we are just seeing that time saving for all clients. So I wouldn't say there's any real kind of outlier in all of those. They're all seeing time benefits. We're seeing the time benefits because we can focus more on optimization of their campaigns. But they're also being able to get closer to their data without having to spend half of their day pulling the data, then to analyze it, then to make decisions, because their data's there for them. So, yeah, I think I might probably clutching at straws, but I would like to say that the biggest percentage of our client portfolio now have that kind of data ops in place, which makes it easier for us and them to make decisions.
Sure. And in terms of results for I guess them, like obviously you're doing the work in-house, are there any kind of results that you've seen from them, or any examples that you could see, like the benefits of them working with you, like in terms of like the chain?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still quite early in that process. However, for some of our clients, we are already starting to see, some uplift in some areas of, say, conversion rates. The kind of lead generation, things like that is increasing. But I might, again, not to kind of bring the pandemic situation into it, but there's a number of factors that have happened over the past few months that have potentially impacted that as well. So it's like, yes, we're seeing these uplifts and we are seeing the automation better and we're getting more time to optimize the accounts, but then there's other kind of real world situations that are potentially impacting this in various areas. So can we definitively say it's that automation that's caused it? Possibly not, but we are seeing many improvements in kind of other areas as well.
Sure. And then, say next year, moving forward, like, have you got any projects coming up, or how do you see Kabula remaining an integral part of your work at Enjoy Digital?
So, the charity is a prime example, because now that we've saved them time, it's allowed them to step back and go, okay, what else can we do? So they've already started to kind of look at other data models that they can feed into it. And they're wanting to work with us on more and more projects. So it's actually allowed us to, start to kind of upsell into other areas and support them in other areas as they grow. So we see that kind of being one of the biggest steps that Kabula will allow us to do, is that we can get this automation in place. We can focus more on helping each of our clients with more and more of their data. So we're not just dealing with their marketing, we're dealing with just their general data. It could be their customer database, it could be kind of any offline marketing they've got. We've been talking to clients about potentially looping in TV data and radio data and how we augment that with digital data. So it's sparking new conversations as we kind of move forward. But it's the savings that we're making in terms of resource that allows us to now have these discussions without the fear of we've got too much data, we don't know what we're doing.
Okay, amazing. And then aside from Kabula, are there any other problems or things that you're trying to solve at the moment, or in terms of obviously data and using data within the world of marketing, are there any problems or things that you're focusing on and big challenges, I guess, for next year?
Again, it's kind of bringing in new data sets and how we can kind of use all of those data sets to augment their marketing. I think that is one of the biggest steps that we're going to move towards. Automation was our biggest problem. Now that we have near enough solved that, I don't think we're ever going to 100% solve it. We can now focus on what's actually critical to customer decisions.
Amazing. Big thank you to Luigi from coming down from Enjoy Digital. My name's Jack. Thank you very much.
Well, I said it's an opportunity now to ask questions of any of our speakers here at the top table. We've got a couple of roving mics in the hall. If you're following this online, there is a facility there. Obviously, just get them in as fast as you can because there will be, understandably, something of a time lag. So, who wants to ask a question? Nobody ever wants to be the first one to start asking a question, but there's bound to be a gentleman there, please, Pete. If you can hang on, I'll get the mic to you. Can you identify yourself and then ask your question, please?
Okay. Hello, I'm Daniel Winstein, CTO of Goodloop. We're an ad tech company. We take money from advertisers and give it to charities. Right, that's me identified. Really great set of talks. Thank you. Got great notes from that. Question for Dave Robinson, but also for others. Personalisation, really key to what you're doing. What do you do about empowering the customer to understand and be in charge of their data and kind of respect their rights there?
It's a great question. It's a pregnant pause there, like I didn't know how to answer it. I'm not sure I do, actually. From our point of view, I think we've always had a stance that the way in which we promise that the data that customers give us will be used has always been very safe, actually, and always been very limited. The way I describe it in pithy terms is you'll never receive a fat-faced catalogue on the basis of having shopped at Boots. And the commitment that we make, therefore, is that we don't make that data available to anyone else. We'll use it with the partners that we work with. But really, if you hear from anyone when you've shared data with Boots, it'll be Boots. That's really important. So there's a level of trust there, and that trust really goes back to the heritage of pharmacy. In reality, that healthcare thing is what underpins a lot of that data relationship with customers. We have really clear consents. Part of our single view of customer has centralised those consents, so a yes in one place applies as a yes everywhere. That's really important, and again, really clear with customers, and if they want to opt out of that, then that removes them from everything as well. The one bit that we're starting to step into, which is definitely going to be more of a challenge for us, is the permission to use sensitive data. So as you start to get into the personalisation of the healthcare space in particular, you need a different level of permission. I can talk to you about mascara, but I can't talk to you about diabetes unless you've given me a separate permission for that. And we haven't collected those things because it hasn't been a capability, and it actually hasn't been seen as the business as something terribly important to be able to do. Definitely is now. That's the next step for us. But it will always be done on the basis that the customer knows what we're doing with it, and if they want to opt out of it, they can do so very, very easily.
Kate, you're nodding along to that.
Yeah, I mean, Wood Mackenzie's part of a global company. We're part of Verisk, who collect personal data and healthcare data. And because of that, we sit under quite strict rules, much stricter than potentially we could for a kind of comparative organisation. And the need to be very explicit about where you're using the data, why you're using the data, and ensuring compliance in all regions geographically. California actually has some of the strictest data rules that we have to govern by. So we basically make sure that all our data globally governs to those rules. And that's really complicated, especially when you're working with partners and suppliers in China that maybe have slightly different views on data and what we should be doing with it. So I think it's a ever-moving, ever-changing feast where you, just when you think you've got ahead of it, you're behind it again. So yeah, I totally agree. It's complicated and you have to keep working at it and investing in it, don't you?
Just to build on that question, and I put this to either Luigi or Jack, there is a very fine dividing line between personalising data and being downright creepy sometimes. And it's how do you establish that line?
It's a very good question. Because we deal with clients across a number of different sectors, that is, I suppose it kind of fits within my role as data ops, because I need to make sure that the data we're gathering meets all these different standards, and that we're not in any way in a breach of GDPR or gathering this little bit of information and passing it to this platform. What's the headaches that's going to cause? There is that fine line, and it's a constant battle because it's an ever-changing landscape. The kind of rules and regulations around that are ever-changing. I suppose we're quite lucky in that most of our client base are purely UK-based. so we don't have kind of international laws to worry about at the moment. But yeah, there is that very fine line of, as you say, being creepy and following the kind of rules and regulations.
Yeah. No, well, it's interesting, Jack, because there are regulations, there are industry practices, but there's also the expectation of the consumer, and those can be very different things sometimes.
Yes, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and this is probably going to sound bizarre, but we were talking about the future of marketing and personalisation, and we were saying that it could get to a point that you could have an actor in a green screen saying someone's name and really, really personalising that data. Would you have a stronger response? Or is it just getting to the point where it's a bit...
I think I'd have a stronger response. Might not be the one you were looking for.
Exactly. And it's like, is it... I don't know if a YouTube ad popped up and said, Jack Frimpson, we know what you've been... Well, no, we know what you've been Googling. I'd slam that laptop closed. No, but it's more of a case of if it's really personalised, that's kind of... It's a very good question. It's a very fine line. And I think that you want to toe the line very gently without it ever coming across as creepy, because we all know that we're all questioning, are our phones listening to us? Do they know everything of it? You want it to feel personalised, but also don't live inside our heads.
It's not just phones, obviously. I mean, televisions. I mean, there are devices in your home for controlling the thermostat on your central heating, for example. Why do those have microphones inside them? These are very good questions. Another question, please. Lady there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Yekemi Otaru. I'm co-founder of Dukaru. We're a management consultancy in Aberdeen. I have a question for Dave, and I also love Kate to weigh in on it. You spoke about specialisms and how the team sort of changed, where you've got people focusing on certain aspects. I think that's really interesting in a world where we're told, jack of all trades, especially especially for me, where we're kind of coming out of being a startup and everyone's basically been expected to work on everything, if you know what I mean. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you made that transition from everyone doing everything to the specialisms, and how that's affected your culture, the way you work, the way you hire within your organization. And I wanted Kate to weigh in, because my organization is similar to Woodmac in terms of B2B type engagements, and how that might look like in a company like Woodmac. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Kate, do you want to go first? Because I went first on the last one.
First of all, I vehemently agree. Specialisms are becoming increasingly important, and the conversations we're having with our people are much more about how we create T-shaped marketers, so people that have a real depth, the T down, and have a kind of broader knowledge here, but they are anchored in a specialism. So, for example, a content marketer who's really focused on generating great content that resonates, but has an understanding of analytics, data, marketing ops as well, but an understanding. We definitely work on specialisms. As a B2B company, caveat, I've only been with the business 2 years, but from what I know from my colleagues, actually they've always been with specialisms for quite a long period of time. There are some generalist program marketers who cover across all the disciplines, but they tend to pull from the specialists across the team. And actually, increasingly, we find those roles harder to fill and the specialist roles easier to fill, because it goes back to that sense of purpose, that what I want to do with my career, that actually people find it easier to anchor on to, I want to be a digital marketer, I want to be a content marketer, and they differentiate them. I want to be creative, for example, and they do differentiate between that a lot more than, say, 10 years ago, where I just wanted to work in marketing. So, yeah, I very much agree and would endorse that approach. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, I have nothing more to add. No, I mean, you don't play your goalie up front, and in the last minute of the match, you might send him up for a corner because needs must. Mm-hmm. But by and large, he stays between the sticks, and that's the way we think about it. Actually, I think the last team that ever won a football match where everyone could play anywhere was 1974 with the Dutch team.
Is that a necessary evolution of your industry, or is it some sort of cyclic fashion? Because way back when, people had specialisms. Then it became, you know, we're looking for generalists. And now we're back to specialists again. Do you foresee a time where it's going to swing back to generalists again?
Less so. It seems to me it's more a factor of the way in which of the tasks that need to be done there. Now, of course, those tasks might change and it may well swing back. But there's some, I think what we're finding with the people that we recruit, the way they think about their career is a little different to maybe the way I thought about my career when I set out. And to Kate's point, actually, people say, look, I want to do this, or I want to, and it might not be that I want to do this for the rest of my life, but actually what I want to do for the next 2 years is be really good at that. And trying to force them to be good at lots of other things. No, there's plenty of places they can go and do the thing that they want to do. And so we're responding to that, and I think it helps. There's definitely less compromise in it. There might be organisational compromise required because the team's a bit less flexible than you might have been used to. But there's a lot less compromise required in terms of the talent that you look for. It becomes much, much easier to find someone who's good at 1 or 2 things than someone who's okay at 10 or 12 things. Much better.
I think it's also a factor of how much bigger our discipline has become. You know, when I first started working in marketing, it was probably like this, and we've spread as, you know, tech's increased, as the appreciation of what marketing drives in a business. It's not just the people who colour in anymore. You know, that's very much when I first started in marketing, in B2B marketing, was some of the perception, and that's radically transformed. And as we've transformed our industry, the roles that are available and what we do has massively expanded. And I think the idea of generalists, marketers, is increasingly becoming less realistic. It may swing back. I can see it swinging back less than I probably could have 10 years ago. So.
Luigi, how do people find out? You know, if we're heading towards a world of specialisms, coming into the industry as a start, how would you find out what your strength, your weaknesses, you know, what your speciality might be?
It's an interesting question. I suppose from a marketing agency's perspective, we often do look for people that have that kind of marketing background but specialise in their particular role. So my colleague Jack, who's with us today, he's been with us for like 4 months plus, and we kind of, when we brought him on board, he didn't have the marketing background, but he kind of ticked all the right boxes for the role that was important. But then as we brought him in, we kind of sat him with the various teams and got him to understand and appreciate the various teams' involvement within that wider business. So I think those specialised areas do seem to, and within marketing we're seeing it more, do seem to be becoming a thing. You know, where we had, say, somebody that worked within the paid media team would deal with paid social, they'd deal maybe with organic social, paid search, display, video, whereas now it's almost like that's splitting up into smaller specialisms. Yes, that may swing back the other way, but, you know, one of the biggest advantages that we try to bring within the team is making sure that they have an appreciation and understanding for everybody's role, but then specialise in their specific role.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question? Right at the front here, please. We'll get a microphone to you.
Hi, my name is Siobhan Nicholson and I work at ICAS, which is a chartered accountancy membership body. Thank you so much for your presentations, that was really interesting. And there was one particular slide that has given me a lot of thought, and it was actually one of yours, Dave, and it was the example you gave of the structure of the organisation being about what we have to say and who we have to say it to, and then how Boots flipped that around to start thinking about the individual first and then what we have to say. And I was just thinking from an organisational perspective, from a marketing perspective, that's an obvious priority, but from an organisational perspective, the priorities might be different to that. And what was your experience at Boots in shifting that from a leadership perspective in how the priorities can be changed to be thinking more about the individual as opposed to the business objectives? And are there any advice for smaller companies trying to do that?
Again, it's a super question, and I don't have a brilliant answer, I'm afraid. I'd caveat my slide with that's where we're headed rather than where we've arrived at. It's dead easy to describe that's what we're doing. In reality, we're somewhere in between. but there's a couple of things I would say. One is, what's really made a difference is, as a business, we've proven that using data to talk to individuals makes more money than not using data to talk to everyone about the same thing. We've shown that, and I won't declare the numbers, but they're big enough for right at the top of the organisation, at the group, you know, where Walgreens Boots Alliance, right at the top of the group to go, okay, well, that looks like a better solution. So that's really helpful. You've got evidence that says we're about making money, we make more money if we do it this way. That's really helpful. I think the other thing to say would be, we haven't quite gone as far as we might. So I mentioned the agile squads that we've built within marketing. They're still actually category focused. So we've got a beauty squad or a health squad. Now, we have made changes like the health squad actually covers pharmacy all the way through. And in the olden days, we would have thought that pharmacy is a very different category. So we have brought those things together. But, you know, we could, and we may well in time, shift those squads' scopes to be customer groups. It might be that there's a squad, I'll give you an example where we're nearly there. There might be a squad that's about mums. At the moment, there's a squad that's about baby. It's not that hard to go, well, maybe with a few tweaks you might think a bit differently. But then what that squad starts to think about is, what's it relevant to talk to mums about, and another of dads as well. But you know, we'll pick our market, being the brand that we are, because actually we might want to talk to that mum about beauty, whereas the baby squad will never talk to that customer about beauty. They'll only talk about baby. So there's everything that we can do. We're not all the way there yet. And again, I suppose the last thing I said, get the ball rolling, get some wins on the board, make some decisions and make a start heading in a direction rather than just being paralysed by the options that you've got. We might well still be staring at the organisational chart and going, oh, do we want to go A or B? And we've said, you know what, go B, and then we'll course correct if we need to. That's what my advice would be. Make some choices, get cracking, and be agile enough to flip it around if you need to.
This kind of builds on something you said, Kate, which was, you know, basically have a plan. You need a plan. Do you stick to the plan? Does the plan change?
If you stick to the plan, you've probably not got it right. I think you have to be constantly looking at your data, at your customers, at your audience, what's happening, tweaking and adjusting. The idea that you have a grand plan and you execute on it, I think is long gone, or for me and for my team anyway. I think working in sprints, we've been doing a similar thing, taking some of the best practice from the dev environment and putting it into our marketing environment. We've not gone as far as you yet, and desperate to. In fact, we're starting to think about how do we tackle, so one of the sectors we work in is metals and mining. We sell products like battery raw materials, research, et cetera, and we've had success recently about putting those together as like a virtual squad, and it's the best performing bit of our marketing team at the moment. And we're saying, right, what's the lessons we can learn from that? So in the same way you're saying test, learn, try something, just get started, I think that's really critical. Don't kind of paralyze yourself with planning, which is why, if I go back to the planning, if you created a plan in January or December or November, depending on how organised your business is for the next year, and you executed every single bit of it and never stopped to pause, reflect, learn, and fail fast, fail forward, and all those good things, if you execute that exact plan, you've probably not hit the nail on the head. And that constant working in 2-week sprints, looking at what worked, looking at what didn't, refreshing and replanning, I think is becoming increasingly critical for marketing teams.
But I'm going to address this to Jack, but I'm actually going to quote you, Kate. You said there was 2 years of change crammed into 2 weeks and that people were currently exhausted by change. You know, change is the default position. It's what we'd all do all the time, which is great if you're like 9 years old, you know. But, you know, if you're a grown-up, Jack, you get fed up of it after a while. You want to have some degree of certainty and normality, and to know that, you know, on that particular day, you're going to have, you know, beans on toast for lunch or whatever it is. You know, it doesn't really matter. Do you see a time when that will actually happen? The industry will start to say, you know what, let's just formalise for a wee while.
I think it's important to have conviction in your actions and follow forward. And if you have a plan, to stick to it. But like anything in life, things don't go according to plan. Like Kate said, like it would be naive not to address change and kind of steer the ship in different directions. But I think the decision on whether you're changing is all dependent. I think if it's because you're not necessarily seeing the results straight away, I think that there's always time for impact, and don't give up, and don't just give up straight away in terms of if you've thought of something and there's a logical decision of why you're facing forward and you're going in that direction, well, test it. But if after a while there's a reason for change, then that's fine, but don't just give up too quickly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. Listen, thank you very much. Can I ask you to thank our speakers one more time, please? Thank you. That's effectively the end of the first session. We're going to take a 35-minute break now. Refreshments will be served upstairs in the stratosphere. Take the time if you can.